The morning still carried the smell of chalk when Lena arrived at school, her uniform too tight, her backpack worn from years of patching. She walked slowly, as if dragging the minutes might delay the inevitable. It wasn't the kind of lateness measured by clocks, but the heaviness of knowing her place in the world was about to be questioned. At the reception desk, the vice principal clutched a clipboard like it was a verdict. Her words were polished, rehearsed, school policy. Outstanding balance. No entry allowed until resolved. The secretary avoided Lena's eyes, typing numbers into a screen as if numbers could ever explain the bruises pride leaves behind. The conversation was not a negotiation. It was a wall. And the wall had only one direction, out. "Lena, I'm sorry," the vice principal said in a tone that suggested she wasn't sorry at all. "You cannot attend classes today." Behind Lena, students drifted by, backpacks bouncing, sneakers squeaking. A few glanced at her and whispered. One girl, once a friend, tightened her grip on her braid and turned away. Another boy smirked. "She can't pay." "My mom told me," he sneered, loud enough to sting. The guard opened the gate, and the iron bars groaned as if even the metal disliked its task. Lena stepped into the sunlight, the sound of the latch closing ringing in her ears like the full stop at the end of a sentence she didn't want to read. The world outside the schoolyard felt colder. Parents kissed their children goodbye at the curb. Some lingered with soft smiles and gentle touches, rituals of belonging she no longer owned. Lena clutched the straps of her backpack until her knuckles whitened, as if holding tighter might keep her place in a world that had just pushed her out. She sat on the concrete steps, trying to shrink herself into the shadow cast by the gate. Minutes stretched. The bell rang. The chatter inside grew faint, then disappeared, swallowed by classroom walls. Through the bars she could see the courtyard, a glimpse of normal she wasn't allowed to touch. Shame rose like heat, settling in her throat. She pressed her lips together, determined not to cry, but tears have a way of ignoring determination. They slid down her cheeks in silence, marking her face with evidence she wished she could hide. Mr. Alvarez, the janitor, passed with his broom and trash bin. He paused, his eyes soft, his whistle falling silent. "You're a good student," he told her quietly, as if offering a secret gift. "Don't let paper decide who you are." Then he kept walking, because kindness inside the gate still had boundaries. Two boys strolled past, jingling coins in their hands. "I've got enough for lunch," one said loudly. "She doesn't." They laughed, the sound brittle, echoing louder than it should have. Lena lowered her head until the stain on the concrete blurred into the shape of a lake, and in her imagination she floated across it, away from the voices, away from the shame. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother, in a meeting. "Can't leave. Are you okay?" Lena typed back yes even though it wasn't true. Then she added, "They said I can't go in until we pay." She didn't use emojis. There was nothing playful about reality. Time passed like thick syrup. The vice principal returned once, asked if her mother had answered, then left again when Lena shook her head. She preferred to wait, to stay seated, even if every second on the steps felt like a spotlight burning her skin. Walking away would mean agreement. Sitting meant defiance, however small. The second bell rang, signaling the start of lessons she wasn't part of. The silence outside grew heavier. Birds chirped by the flagpole, their songs exaggerated against the absence of children's voices. Somewhere, a marker squeaked on a whiteboard. She imagined her name erased from every page. Then came the car. Dark, polished, its engine a low hum that felt out of place near sidewalks cracked with age. It pulled up slowly, indicator ticking like a heartbeat. Lena didn't look at first. Cars came and went. Cars belonged to other people's parents, other people's lives. But this one didn't leave. It idled, waiting, as if searching for a reason to stay. Lena shifted her weight, hugging her backpack closer. The straps cut into her shoulders, heavy with books she wasn't allowed to open. She thought about the word policy, how grown-ups used it like a hammer to drive nails into children's futures. She thought about her mother, about exhaustion written across her face every night. She thought about the father she'd never met, whose name was nothing more than a rumor whispered between questions her mother never answered. The gate behind her was closed. The world ahead of her felt endless. And between the two, that car waited, quiet, steady, deliberate. Lena didn't know it yet, but the sound of that engine was the first note of a song that would rewrite everything she believed about belonging. The car did not roar, it lingered, as if engines could hesitate the way people do. A man sat behind the wheel, posture upright, gaze fixed through the windshield at the gate where the girl waited with her backpack clutched tight. He could have driven on. Most do. He'd done it himself 1,000 times, filed away a hard scene under "not mine" and pressed the accelerator. But something about the way Lena held still, refusing to fold into the smallness handed to her, snagged him like a thread on a nail. He killed the engine and listened to the sudden quiet. Birds, faint traffic, the hollow ring of a bell that wasn't calling everyone. His hand hovered over the door handle. A brief, ridiculous thought flashed: what if he made it worse? As if indifference were ever safer than kindness. He exhaled, stepped out, and the door thumped shut with the soft authority of expensive things. He was well dressed without being loud about it, good shoes that made gravel sound precise, a jacket cut to fit a life of appointments. The security guard glanced up. Respect moved across the man's face and then off it. He nodded back, the universal exchange of men who know rules and the limits of enforcing them. The man's eyes returned to Lena. She wiped her face with the back of her sleeve and then, remembering pride, pretended she hadn't. "Morning," he said. The word carried no pity, only presence. She answered with a small nod. When misery stays too long, language goes first. He looked at the gate, then at the office windows, then at the clipboard under the vice principal's arm as she reappeared. Bureaucracy had a scent, lemon cleaner and paper, and it floated out each time the door opened. "Is there someone I can speak to?" he asked, tone courteous but edged with purpose. The vice principal tightened around her clipboard. "Parents or guardians only." He glanced at Lena. "Is your mother on her way?" "She's working," the girl said, voice thin but steady. "Then I'll wait," he replied, as if patience were a muscle he trusted. He stepped aside, not past the gate, not into the office, just into the space between, a stubborn no-man's land where decisions learn to change their minds. He took out his phone, typed nothing, put it away. Instead he watched, the courtyard through the bars, the slow choreography of those who belonged, the stillness of one who didn't. Mr. Alvarez came back, broom leaning like a companion. The janitor's eyes traveled from the man's shoes to his face, measuring, not judging. "She's a good kid," he said in a tone that declared a truth, not a plea. The man's gaze flickered with a warmth that knew how to hide. "I can tell," he answered. "What's your name?" "Alvarez," the janitor said. "Daniel." "Daniel," the man repeated, as if trying the sound on for memory later. He looked at the latch, the cheap padlock scuffed by years of refusing small people. "How often does this happen?" Daniel shrugged with the helplessness of those who sweep up the pieces after policy breaks them. "Often enough that I keep extra cups by the cooler." The man took that in, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Then he turned back to Lena. "May I sit?" He didn't wait for an answer, permission was a courtesy, not a requirement, and lowered himself onto the concrete step beside her, leaving respectful space, hands folded. Inside, a class burst into laughter. Outside, 3 pigeons startled and became quick gray commas in the morning sentence. Lena stared at the fence. The man studied the pattern of shadow the bars cast across the steps, neat prison stripes the sun drew without malice. "What's your favorite subject?" he asked at last. She hesitated, suspects in her mind lining up, trap and pity and none of your business. But the question was shaped like an open hand. "Reading," she said. After a beat, more honest, stories. He nodded as if a ledger in his head balanced. "Good choice." They sat like that for a while, quiet beside quiet, until the vice principal opened the door again and called Lena's name with managerial cheerfulness. "Your mother answered." She can't come. She gave permission for you to walk home. Lena stood. The man did not. Walk with her, he said to himself more than to anyone else. Then, to Lena, may I give you a ride? He gestured at the car without flourish. Lena glanced at Daniel. The janitor's face arranged itself around caution and trust until both fit. He nodded. It's all right, kid. The man looked to the vice principal. Any reason I shouldn't? It wasn't a challenge, only a request that authority declare its last card. She shook her head and retreated to the safety of forms. They didn't speak much in the car. Silence can be comfortable when it respects the person it sits with. The city unspooled through the windshield, laundromats with hand-painted signs, a bakery whose window glass glowed with trays of loaves, family businesses performing small miracles of endurance. The man drove the way good surgeons move, steady, unrushed, precise. Lena gave directions that proved she'd mapped every crack in the sidewalks. Left after the park, past the tailor with the loud radio, third building with the chipped blue steps. When he pulled up, embarrassment flickered in her eyes, a guard dog used to barking. The paint on the stoop flaked like old sky. The buzzer was the kind that hurts fingers. Thank you, she said, almost whispering, and gripped the door handle. He reached into the center console, then stopped. Money was the simplest answer he had, and the poorest. He knew the damage bills could do, how they could bruise dignity even while relieving hunger. He settled for a car instead, plain white, a name and a number. If your mother wants to talk, he said. Or if the school wants to. He hesitated, then added a sentence he hadn't planned to speak out loud. If anyone thinks this is how education should work, I'd like to disagree, formally. Lena took the card like a fragile object and did not read it. She tucked it into the front pocket of her backpack, the one with the stubborn zipper, and got out. Goodbye, she said, but the word felt too permanent. She corrected herself. Maybe, see you. Maybe, he echoed, and watched her climb. She pressed the buzzer, waited, then punched in the code she knew, a rhythm of survival. The door clicked. She vanished into the dim stairwell like a swallow into a nest. He didn't drive off immediately. He looked up at the building's windows, then at his reflection in the rearview mirror, one of those faces success polishes until it forgets where it learned to be human. A small boy's laugh drifted from the park, a siren protested in the distance, a bus exhaled at a corner. He tapped the steering wheel once, twice, and did something he could have avoided all his adult life. He turned back. The park wore autumn lightly, yellow scattered like coins under benches, swings squeaking with soft complaint. Daniel, off shift early, sat feeding pigeons, the rhythm of his hand slow as prayer. The man took the bench opposite. They regarded each other like two men who understood work even if theirs was paid in different currencies. You came back, Daniel said. I did, the man answered. He folded his jacket over his knee, leaned forward. What's the principal's name? And the bursar? In the board chair, if you know it. Daniel's mouth twitched. You're not the first to make a call. I might be the first who won't hang up, the man said, not boasting, just promising. Tell me what you'd fix first if someone actually listened. The janitor considered. Start with how we say policy to children. Make it sound like paint, not brick. The man nodded slowly, as if the idea clicked home in a place words seldom reach. Paint, he repeated. Not brick. They talked for 20 minutes about leaky pipes and leaky budgets, about late scholarships and early humiliations, about how some doors stick for the same kids every year. The man took no notes, yet kept everything. When he stood to leave, he shook Daniel's hand with the deliberate pressure of respect. Thank you, he said. For knowing every name. Names make people people, Daniel replied, and the man smiled in a way that suggested he'd put that sentence somewhere safe. He drove across town with decisions settling into place like a weight that belonged there. At an office where glass walls turned the sky into geometry, assistants stood when he walked in, and meetings rearranged themselves to fit his priorities. He didn't sit. He said 3 things to 3 different people, and his tone, calm, unhurried, absolute, made the tasks turn real: call the school, clear an account, set up a fund, make it quiet, make it fast. When he finally sat, he opened a drawer he seldom touched. Inside lay a tin with a faded sticker, an artifact from a summer that had taught him to love and to run in the same month. He hadn't opened it in years. His thumb traced the edge but didn't lift the lid. Not yet. The past didn't need an invitation, it was already walking down the hall. Back on Lena's block, a door at the top of chipped blue steps opened again. Her mother returned from work with shoulders that carried 2 jobs and the rent. Lena held out the white card without ceremony. Her mother read the name twice, lips forming it like a memory tasting itself. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall as if walls sometimes answer. Then she breathed, a long, careful breath people take when something fragile might finally change. Night slid in with its quiet arguments, radiators ticking, someone's TV leaking laughter, a pot simmering in a neighbor's kitchen. Lena lay awake, counting seconds the way others count sheep, not knowing that somewhere across town, a file with her name had been pulled from a stack and placed at the center of a polished desk. Not knowing that a man who almost drove on had turned back, and that, in every story that matters, turning back is the first miracle. He arrived before the first bell, when hallways still smelled like floor wax and possibility. The sun was low enough to lay long stripes across the courtyard, bars of light to match the bars of the gate that had held a child outside. He parked where teachers park, the sort of small trespass that says, "I intend to be taken seriously," and walked toward the office with a calm that made even the hurried slow down. Inside, the secretary looked up and found herself straightening, the way people do when a presence changes the temperature of a room. The vice principal appeared with her clipboard, already rehearsing the phrases that had ended so many mornings. Policy. Balance due. Exceptions not permitted. She began the script. He let her finish. Interruptions are for arguments, respect is for negotiations you plan to win. "Thank you," he said gently when her words stopped. "May I speak with the principal?" It wasn't a question that asked permission. It opened a door. The principal came with a cautious smile and a pen she clicked twice. He introduced himself, not with titles but with intent. "I saw a student turned away yesterday. I'd like to resolve her account." The principal gestured toward chairs. They sat. A file appeared, thin manila, fat with small indignities, and a number was named. He nodded once, a single precise movement that carried the weight of done. He did not ask for a receipt, he asked for a copy of the policy that had made a morning into a lesson no child should learn. "Enforcement is part of fairness," the principal offered, pen clicking again. "We can't run a school on exceptions." "Of course," he replied. "But fairness without context is math without story. Children live in stories." He paused. "How many did we refuse last semester?" Silence multiplied. The secretary shifted. Somewhere down the hall a teacher's laugh thinned into quiet. He placed a check on the desk, not dramatic, not performative, simply enough. "Please mark Lena's account current," he said. "And while you're in the ledger, create a separate line. Call it the Promise Fund. Apply it to any student for whom policy has replaced compassion." Quietly, without plaques. His voice was even, but it carried a kind of gravity that makes pens stop clicking and start writing. The principal studied him with the look of someone who suspects she is meeting a donor and is unexpectedly meeting a mirror. "This is generous," she said. "It's ordinary," he answered. "What's extraordinary is turning a child into a caution sign." The secretary's fingers hovered over the keyboard, then began to move, the way fingers do when they realize they can deliver better futures just as easily as they deliver bills. On the screen, a red status flag slid from delinquent to current. Another field appeared, one no one had thought to add before. Promise Fund, active. The principal signed a memo to the bursar. The paper made the small, hopeful sound of a page turned. "Effective immediately," the principal said, and she meant it. "She can return to class today." He inclined his head. "And Mr. Daniel Alvarez?" "The custodian." May you join us for a minute? Most meetings do not invite the person who knows the names without seeing the rosters. This one did. Daniel wiped sawdust from his sleeve and stepped into the office with the quiet authority of someone who fixes things others ignore. The man stood to greet him, hand out, grip firm. "Thank you for the truth yesterday," he said. "I'm trying to make it contagious." Daniel's smile was a half-sunrise. "Truth travels when it's carried," he murmured. They walked out together into a building that sounded different, doors opening, feet hurrying, a bell that, today, felt like an invitation rather than a verdict. Children moved in a river of chatter. The man scanned the current for one face. He found Lena near the lockers, anchor-shaped backpack slung on one shoulder, eyes drawn to the floor as if it had something important to say. When she saw him, surprise crossed her face, followed by the reflex of bracing. People who have learned to expect no rarely recognize yes at first glance. "Good morning," he said, ordinary words, made new. "You're enrolled. Go to class." Her hand flew to her mouth. How?" The word sat there, small and stunned. "By remembering that policy serves children, not the other way around," he said. "Come on. Let's walk." They moved down the hall together, the man not touching her, respect marks boundaries, but matching her pace. Students stared with the polite curiosity of kids who know something interesting is happening and also that the day insists on continuing. Teachers nodded, relief visible at the edges of their eyes. The principal followed a few steps behind, as if to escort a decision back to where it belonged. At the classroom door, Lena hesitated. The threshold looked taller than yesterday. The man crouched slightly, bringing his voice to the height where courage hears best. "There will be whispers," he said, "and then there won't. Not because they change, but because you will." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and stepped inside. Desks scraped. The teacher smiled, real and simple. A pencil rolled to greet her like a small dog. The man remained at the door, watching her find her chair, the act of sitting down transformed into the ceremony of belonging. When her notebook opened, a small sigh escaped the room, the kind of exhale a place makes when something that was missing returns to its proper shelf. He turned to leave, but there was one more hallway to walk, one more door that had remained shut for years. He texted a number he had avoided as if avoidance were a synonym for amends. "I'm at the school. We need to talk." The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Come to the steps after last period." He put the phone away before the reply could accuse him of hoping. The day stretched. He met briefly with the bursar, translated generosity into line items, asked for quarterly reports that measured both dollars and dignity. He sat with the principal and sketched a pilot for small stipends, bus fare, lunch waivers, exam fees, because the distance between a child and her desk is often measured in the least glamorous units. He asked for one more change, a quiet one. When staff say policy to a child, they must also say person. "It's a sentence," he explained. "It needs both nouns." By the final bell, the school felt lighter, though nothing visible had changed. Lena filed out with her class, a sheet of homework pinned beneath her arm like a passport. She saw him waiting on the steps. Beside him stood a woman with tired grace and a scar of caution in her posture, her mother. Contact had been made. A door inside a door had opened. The reunion wasn't cinematic. No sobbing embrace. No orchestral swell. Just three people on a set of concrete steps where all the city's footsteps eventually pass. The man's voice lowered. "I cleared the balance. There's a fun now. For others too." He looked at the mother when he said others, as if permission to help many must be granted by the one you failed first. The mother's thanks got stuck behind 100 swallowed resentments. Gratitude and anger are neighbors who share a wall. She managed, it was the right thing. Not warm. Not cold. True. He nodded, accepting both the words and the temperature. Then he reached into his jacket and produced a tin older than any of them wanted to admit. Its lid bore a faded sticker, 2 initials, looped together the way young people think time will be. He turned it in his hands like a compass rediscovering north. "I should have come sooner," he said. "That sentence is useless, but I need to say it out loud." The mother held his gaze. She had once loved the boy wearing that man's face. She could still find him if she looked through enough layers. "Sooner doesn't exist," she answered. "There is only now." He breathed once, the kind that resets a life by a degree. "Then now," he said quietly, and finally let the tin open. Inside lay a photo, 2 kids on a summer pier, barefoot and invincible, and a folded letter he read without unfolding, because some words can be recited from memory whether you deserve them or not. He put the tin away and faced the person who mattered most. "Lena," he said. Her name changed him in the saying. "I don't want to confuse you. I don't want to claim what I didn't earn. But I need to tell the truth in the place where lies grew. I am your father." Everything stilled the way it does right before a glass falls, time holding its breath, sound stepping outside. Lena's eyes did not widen, they narrowed, focusing. Children learn early to X-ray sentences for structure. She studied his face as if reading a map she'd been given late. The line of the mouth. The angle of the brow. The careful way he had anger in his throat. Pieces clicked in a quiet private puzzle. "Did you know about me?" she asked. "Not how could you? Not why now? Just the question that matters most to children, was I seen?" He swallowed. "Honesty costs more when you've paid late." "I knew. Not enough. Not like this. I told myself I'd come when I had something worthy to bring." His voice dipped at the shame. "I didn't understand that showing up empty-handed is still showing up." The mother looked away, grief briefly winning its long war with composure. Lena held very still. The world resumed around them, buses ranting, a skateboard laughing against pavement, the bell inside resetting the afternoon. In that noise, a different quiet formed, one made of choices. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Lena asked, and the question contained more mercy than he deserved. "I will," he said, and meant it with the stubbornness of a man who had finally chosen a direction that didn't involve leaving. He did not reach to touch her. He knew better than to claim with a hand what must be offered with days. Instead, he stepped aside as she and her mother began the walk home, staying half a stride behind, sentinel not center. When they paused at the curb, he moved ahead to check the traffic, then fell back again. The choreography of beginnings is made of small, careful steps. At the corner, Daniel waited with a wave that looked like blessing. "You found your way," the janitor said. "Someone left the light on," the man answered. They turned down the block where the tailor's radio sang loudly and the bakery sold yesterday's bread at a kind price. Lena said nothing, and in her silence lived a door, not yet open, not closed, hinges oiled, handle warm. Behind them, in an office that had learned a new word, the secretary saved a file with a different ending. On the screen, a name moved from one column to another, and in that small, bright migration, a life changed its tense, not was, not will be, but is. Rebuilding did not arrive like a parade, it came like rain that learns the roof one slow drop at a time. The next morning, he was there, half a step behind mother and daughter on the walk to school, keeping a respectful distance that said present without presuming welcome. He carried nothing in his hands, because he'd finally understood that the heaviest things to bring are attention and time. Lena did not test him with questions. Children who've waited too long don't interview miracles, they audit minutes. So she counted. He showed up before the bell, he waited on the steps after last period, he did not fill silences with apologies that made him feel better, he let them be as long as they needed to be. The ledger of trust is built from small deposits. At home, the mother set rules as if she were framing a doorway that had stood open to weather. "You don't let yourself in," she said. "You knock." He nodded. "You don't promise what a calendar can't keep." He nodded again. "You don't buy what can be mended." He smiled a little at that one and left the sleek credit card in his wallet like a dog that had learned to sit. Instead, he fixed the cabinet hinge that always squealed, the window lock that never caught, and, on a Saturday afternoon when the pipes banged like old drums, he learned where the building kept its stop valve and became a man for whom water obeyed. He failed sometimes. He texted running late once when he wasn't. He brought takeout on a night when the mother had already cooked. He tried a joke that died between them and looked, for a second, like the boy he had been, cleverness hiding a bruise. But he didn't evaporate. He stayed in the room with his mistakes and let them be measured. At school, the Promise Fund stopped being a rumor and started being a door. The principal rewrote 2 paragraphs in the handbook. The secretary added a discreet line to the enrollment forms that read, "If paying now is a problem, speak to us." Teachers began to say the phrase "we'll figure it out" with competence instead of pity. And Daniel, the custodian who knew more names than any spreadsheet, was invited to the staff meeting where decisions stop pretending they are neutral. He sat at the back, hands folded, and said one thing that changed the tone: if a child stands outside, learning stands outside with her. One Thursday, the man arrived at the steps to find Lena already waiting, a notebook balanced across her knees. She did not hide the page when he approached, another small deposit. He asked nothing. Curiosity can be a pry bar. He kept his closed. She turned the notebook anyway, as if offering a palm. Lines marched across the paper in neat, stubborn handwriting, a story about a girl who collected sounds in jars because no one believed her when she said music lived in rain gutters and in the space between door and frame. The title, Invisible Ink, sat at the top, underlined once. "It's good," he said, and meant it without adjectives. "May I hear it out loud?" Her voice at first was the voice of someone reading in a courtroom, standing before a jury that has already voted. But as the girl in the story learned where to place her jars, Lena's sentences found their own rhythm. By the time she reached the last paragraph, the world around the steps, the buses, the pigeons, the announcements, seemed to lower its volume out of courtesy. When she finished, he clapped once, quietly, like a coach signals yes without disturbing the game. "What happens next?" he asked. "She learns the song the jars have been trying to sing," Lena said, then caught herself and shrugged, embarrassed by hope. "Then write that," he answered. "Endings don't have to be a door slammed. Sometimes they're a window opened." He didn't offer to publish anything or to show someone important. He brought her a small, sturdy notebook from the pharmacy on the corner, the kind whose spine doesn't betray you in week 2. Inside the cover he wrote nothing fancy, only her name and the date, to prove to the future that the present had noticed her. He and the mother did not rewrite their history into romance. They stepped around the old furniture of What If and left it where it belonged, in a room they could visit but not live in. On evenings when shifts aligned, the 3 of them ate at the small table by the window and invented rituals: Friday tea with too much honey, Saturday morning walks to the bakery for yesterday's bread, still warm, still proof that time can be kind, Sunday night lists of 3 things that didn't go wrong. Sometimes the lists were silly. Sometimes they were serious. Sometimes where all at the table was number 1, 2, and 3. News of the Promise Fund rippled the way true news does, quietly, through kitchens and bus stops and group chats where mothers share codes for coupons and cures for worry. A boy returned after a week away with shoes that didn't hurt his feet. A girl in the grade above Lena kept her seat in the exam prep class because a fee that pretended to be small stopped pretending. No one posted selfies with their paperwork. The receipts were measured in attendance and sighs of relief. The man, who had learned to schedule rescue the way he once scheduled deals, began to cancel other things. He missed a dinner where a contract was toasted, and the partners frowned at the ledger line that didn't expand. He answered a call from a board chair in the school parking lot and said, "Not now." He watched his reflection in the black glass of his office and found it less interesting than the reflection he'd seen in Lena's eyes when a paragraph landed. He did not call this redemption. He called it priority. There were setbacks. A classmate whose family liked the sound of their own generosity told Lena that charity looked good on her. A teacher, flustered and tired, snapped "Be grateful" when she asked for a second copy of a worksheet. The old gate latch still stuck some mornings, and the sound made old shame try to climb her throat. But the muscle of belonging had begun to grow. When cruelty flicked a finger, it meant more than air. On a gray afternoon that wanted to be rain, the principal asked Lena to step into the office. For a second, everything in her chest emptied. Offices are where stories are cut short. But the principal was smiling in the honest way of someone whose mouth has finally learned how. "There's an assembly next week," she said. "We're highlighting voices." She hesitated, clicked no pens. Would you read something you wrote?" Lena's first answer lived in the language of no, no, because microphones make your hands betray you, no, because eyes feel like weather, no, because people who watched you outside will watch differently inside. She said none of that. She said, yes, and felt her ribs make room. At home, she told her mother first. The mother hugged her, with both arms and with the kind of silence that leaves space for the good thing to keep growing. When the man arrived, late but honest about it, they rehearsed in the kitchen. He kept time on the counter with his fingers, not rushing the places where breath needed to sit. "Here," he said, tapping the word door as if it were a drum that calls a village. Pause. Let it land. He did not say don't be afraid. He remembered what fear does when told it doesn't exist. He said instead, if your hands shake, let them. It just means your body understands this matters. On the morning of the assembly, the school smelled like varnish and nerves. Lines of chairs made the auditorium look like a field that had learned to grow people. The principal spoke shorter than principals usually do. Then students climbed the steps to the stage, each one carrying a small piece of the building to the microphone. When Lena's name was called, a hush moved through the room that wasn't about her, it was about what rooms remember. She began with a sentence that wore its own feet, sure, steady, determined to travel. She read about gates and jars and invisible ink, about policy as paint and people as walls, about a custodian who knew every name and a fund that believed in yet more than in no. She read as if she was telling a story to the one child who had not yet been invited in. From the second row, the mother watched with the concentration of someone threading a needle in a moving bus. Beside her, the man sat forward, elbows on knees, not praying exactly, but listening with the reverence that resembles it. When Lena reached the last line, she lifted her eyes and let the silence hold, one heartbeat, two, so the words could finish landing. Then she stepped back from the microphone the way a person steps off a ferry onto solid ground. The applause rose, not a stadium roar, not polite tapping. Warmth. Chairs scooted. A teacher who had once snapped "Be grateful" wiped the side of her eye. Daniel, from the doorway, nodded once and returned to the business of keeping things from breaking. Outside, after, the three of them stood in sunlight that managed to find a gap in the clouds. The mother's hand rested on Lena's shoulder like a promise. The man did not reach for her, he had learned to keep his hands for what they could carry, chairs, bags, time. "You did it," he said. "No," Lena answered, surprising herself with the courage it takes to be accurate. "We did it." He shook his head, smiling. "We're doing it," he corrected, because he had learned the trick tense of repair, present continuous. Down the hall, the principal pinned a flyer to the board about a new resource shelf, bus passes, snack vouchers, extra notebooks. The sign above it read, "Take what you need." That's what schools are for. Someone had drawn a small door in the corner and left it slightly ajar. Night would bring more ordinary things, homework to finish, a sink to unclog, a calendar to argue with. But before the day let go, the bell rang one last time, and it sounded exactly like an invitation. The auditorium was still echoing with Lena's voice when the days that followed began to stretch differently. What had been a single story told at a microphone became a current that pulled the whole school along. Teachers spoke about policy with softer edges. Parents whispered about the fun that seemed to erase shame before it could take root. And the students, those who had once laughed or looked away, now carried themselves with a peculiar new caution, the kind people were when they realize cruelty as witnesses. The man watched all of it quietly. He had no interest in banners or plaques. His satisfaction was simpler. Lena arrived at the gate every morning and walked through without hesitation. The latch no longer sang its metallic sentence against her. She moved into her classroom as if it had been waiting all along, which it had. At home, the changes were subtler. The mother still guarded her words like coins counted twice, but her posture shifted. She allowed the man to fix the socket in the hallway, to carry groceries up the chipped steps, to sign Lena's reading log with a steady hand. She did not call it forgiveness, she called it Tuesday. And Tuesday, repeated enough times, began to feel like the scaffolding of a new life. Lena herself grew in inches invisible to a ruler. She filled notebooks with stories about invisible ink, jars of sound, doors that chose when to open. She read them aloud sometimes, never demanding applause, only asking for ears. Her mother listened while cooking. The man listened while marking lines in his calendar he no longer intended to obey. Each time, Lena looked taller, not in height but in belonging. One afternoon, Daniel found her sitting on the steps after dismissal, scribbling in her latest notebook. He leaned on his broom and smiled. "You're writing the future, aren't you?" She grinned. "I'm just writing what I don't want to forget." "That's the same thing," Daniel replied. He tipped his cap and walked on, leaving behind a sentence that would echo in her pages later. The Promise Fund expanded in quiet circles. More children stayed in class, fewer parents carried humiliation home in envelopes. The principal spoke less of rules and more of responsibility. Even the secretary, who once typed without lifting her eyes, now greeted each student by name as if names were keys. A culture was shifting, not by decree but by accumulation, like water wearing stone into shape. For the man, the work was never finished. He attended board meetings where policy tried to reassert itself, and he countered with stories. He sat in cafeterias and listened to the mathematics of hunger, who had lunch money, who didn't, who pretended they weren't hungry to avoid exposure. He brought not sandwiches but systems, ensuring free meals could be claimed without shame. Slowly, the school became less of a gate and more of a bridge. And then came the morning when Lena, waiting with her mother at the curb, looked at him not as an accessory to her life but as part of the structure. "Will you be at the assembly next month?" she asked. It was a simple question, but in it lived a verdict: you are expected. You belong in the picture. His answer was steady. "I will." That night, he opened the tin again, the one with the summer photo and the letter folded small. He placed Lena's latest notebook beside it in the drawer. Two artifacts, decades apart, now neighbors. He closed the drawer with a kind of peace that doesn't erase regret but makes space beside it. The final assembly of the year came with banners and folding chairs, with programs printed in black and white. Students lined up in rows like sentences waiting to be spoken. Parents filled the back rows, phones lifted to catch seconds they'd later replay. Lena walked onto the stage, not to read this time but to introduce others. Her voice no longer wavered. It carried. She called each name like she was opening a door. When she finished, the applause was not just for her, it was for the idea that no one stood outside anymore. From the audience, her mother's hands met in proud rhythm. Beside her, the man clapped too, not louder than anyone else but with the satisfaction of someone whose palms had finally found their purpose. Daniel leaned against the wall, nodding as if he'd seen this ending long before anyone believed in it. The bell that ended the assembly rang out through the halls, its tone no different than any other day. Yet to those who listened closely, it sounded less like an order and more like an invitation. Students streamed into the courtyard not with dread but with chatter, their laughter no longer practiced but real. The gate, unlocked and unused, swung idly in the breeze. Lena descended the stage steps and spotted her mother and father together, not side by side in romance but aligned in presence. She ran to them, notebook clutched against her chest. "I did it," she said breathlessly. Her mother kissed her forehead. The man bent slightly, careful not to crowd her, and said, "You'll do more." In that moment, there was no past heavy enough to outweigh the present. The three of them stood framed by sunlight pouring through high windows, ordinary and extraordinary at once. Around them, other children filed out, each carrying the invisible weight of futures that no longer felt locked. If this story touched you, if you believe no child should ever be left outside the gate, then help us keep telling these stories. Subscribe to Cryspire, share this video, and let others hear that compassion is louder than policy. Because every time we open a door for one child, the bell truly rings for everyone.